عندي 106 سنين 106 سنين الحمد لله.
Hello and welcome to Meet Us on the Abraham Path. I'm Anisa Mehdi, Executive Director of the Abraham Path Initiative. Today we are going beyond the edges of Southwest Asia in order to talk about trails and walking and the impact that of tourism and economic development around the world. We have joining us today Galeo Saintz, who is the International Chair of the World Trails Network. Galeo is joining us from Cape Town, South Africa. Galeo, would you put your camera on as well?
Oh, that's a really good idea. Sorry, Anisa, I thought you could see me.
Wonderful. It's so good to see you. So good to see you. So you're in Cape Town, and you've told me that everywhere you look in Cape Town, there's a great view. Is there a,
I'll take you on a little quick tour where I am right now. I'm in the city, and we have it's dusk, so we've got the last of the sun that's looking across the city towards the city center, and there's the Lion's Head mountain in the background there, and in the foreshore is the harbor of Cape Town City. So I think you can get a slight sense. There's the last of the sun going down, so we'll see some city lights shortly. But that's where I am, and it's a great part of the world.
I'm sure. Thank you for showing us a little bit of what you see. Galeo, you have a master's degree in ecology. You have developed trails. You are a trail guide. You're a poet, and I know that that's got to be a very elevated space. But I'm curious about how you turned an education and avocation into a vocation with your work in trails.
Well, I guess it all happened by mistake, really, Anisa, because in general, I'm not really a hiker, although we got out on trails as young kids with my family. I'm more a rock climber. That's my sort of outdoor pursuit. And the long distance trail story really began with my studies and when I was studying in the UK, and I chose to do my dissertation on conservation corridors. And so that's how that led me into trails. It's a long story. I'll be explaining a little bit more shortly.
Great. Looking forward to it. You know, trails, I am neither a hiker. I came to the Abraham Path Initiative because of my interest in the region, that Southwest Asia / Middle East, which is such a politically charged term. My father is Iraqi, and so I had a sort of a biological connection as well. But I find that walking has incredible impact that I hadn't recognized before in terms of community development, in terms of economic development, and of course that wonderful access to self, you know, that touch of inner peace that you can get while you're walking. I'm wondering if you would lead us more on your journey in terms of those areas, and in particular, what brought you to the World Trails Network?
Great pleasure, Anisa. So I'll kick off with an image that for me is really kind of says it all. And it's this, I don't know if my presentation's playing yet. There we go. So I'm gonna sort of answer your question with the this picture of an why are we not moving as fast as I thought here? Let's just try again. There we go. So this is this is your classic African elephant, and elephants are renowned for being path builders, for being trail makers. They are responsible in the African bush for pulling down or knocking over trees and making way for other species and animals to access grazing, or to access the leaves of the trees that they knock down, and also to make pathways. So elephants are renowned path makers in that sense, and not just in Africa, but in previous times across Asia as well. And so my journey with trails really in my professional capacity began in about the late 2005 when I was completing my dissertation on ecological science and conservation corridors. And I met Joan Burning, who's a friend of mine, who was at the time establishing an initiative called the Eden to Addo Corridor. And one of the plans as founders of that initiative, we decided to create a long distance walk through the proposed corridor as a way of sort of launching this initiative and celebrating it. And the Eden to Addo Corridor is, it's a 350-kilometer long stretch of land, and it connects three protected areas. So if you look at this map, you can see there's what's called the Tsitsikamma Formosa protected area outside Plettenberg Bay, and further inland you've got something called the Baviaanskloof, and further east of that you've got the Addo Elephant National Park. And Joan was sitting on her back sort of veranda one afternoon and realized that to her west there was South Africa's and Africa's last single most southern unfenced wild elephant, and its closest kin was some 350 kilometers to the east. And that's where she had this vision to create a biodiversity corridor. And so I got involved then in creating this hike that would go through that proposed corridor, which today forms then the Eden to Addo Great Corridor hike. And it's a beautiful wild landscape which took all of us by surprise at the time. It's a trail experience that happens once a year essentially in the springtime in South Africa, and is used as a fundraising tool for the Corridor Initiative to champion the conservation work that they do. So the Eden to Addo was really where I started out looking at hiking, where I started to become more of a wilderness guide, or a mountain wilderness guide in particular, and taking people annually on this incredible traverse through the Eastern Cape Mountains that really connected a number of diverse communities, and in particular brought together people interested in conservation and wanting to know more about the biodiversity of the region. This image, for instance, is a classic camp on the Eden to Addo, where it's a fully supported hiking experience, and something that is quite wonderful and exciting to participate in. So this is a photograph of some of the elephants that one can see in the Addo Elephant National Park. So it's quite an ambitious project, this, and I'm very glad to say that the founders and the team that is currently managing the Eden to Addo are doing amazing work in raising awareness for biodiversity and the need for corridors in our time. My journey from Eden to Addo then moved on to a project. I was introduced to a young man who was keen on creating a similar kind of long distance hike. So at the time when Eden to Addo was founded, it was South Africa's longest walking experience. A few years later, I teamed up with a friend called Ivan Groenhoff, and we established then South Africa's longest mountain traverse, the Rim of Africa, which comes close to 150 kilometers, and follows this time around, instead of following old elephant migration paths, the Rim of Africa essentially tracks, oh wait, I've lost my screen. The Rim of Africa essentially tracks oh, excuse me a second, I've got a mouse that's running all over the screen now. There we go, here we're back here. The Rim of Africa follows, instead of the leopards, we follow another species essentially through the corridors of the Cape Fold Mountains, and that is the Cape leopard. And this is a camera trap photograph of the Cape leopard, and they're much smaller animals than your classic African leopard. They're very shy. You hardly see them, and you're very, very lucky if you actually see one in the wild. And they're a beautiful, beautiful mascot. The Rim of Africa, as it traverses these range of mountains, we oftentimes on a daily basis are tracking the spoor or the tracks of leopards who've been either before us the night before or a few days before that. So the Rim of Africa really is where my journey then to the World Trails Network began. And this is just an image of a hiker on the Rim of Africa. There's lots of water that we have on this route. And you can see here as well in this image a little bit of a sense of the vastness of the landscape that we walk through and across. The entire skyline that you can see in this photograph is what we then walk. The Rim of Africa taking 56 days, of course, to complete, which is quite an undertaking. One of the primary sort of attractions of the Rim of Africa from a biodiversity perspective is that it falls smack in the middle of the Cape Floristic region. And now the Cape Floristic region is one of the floral regions of the world. It's the smallest floral region of the world, but it has in excess of 9,000 species of plants and flowers, 70% of which are endemic to the region, which means they occur absolutely nowhere else. And the hiker in this photograph, for instance, is taking a photograph of a species of protea called the Leucospermum reflexum, which consists of a small copse of these plants deep in the wilderness of the mountain areas. And I mean, when I say small copse, I mean it's like maybe the size of 2 or 3 football fields. And these flowers do not occur anywhere else, this particular species. They live there, they grow there, and that's where they exist on the planet. So there's something very, very special about encountering this kind of floral diversity on the Rim of Africa route. So as I mentioned, it was with Rim of Africa, one day we received an email from an organization in South Korea called the Jejuole Foundation, and they sent us an invitation inviting us to come and give a presentation at the World Trails Conference. It would be the 3rd World Trails Conference that would be taking place, and would we like to attend? And now neither of us had heard of Jejuole, weren't entirely certain as to where Korea was, but we pulled straws, and it ended up being myself who then traveled to South Korea to attend the World Trails Conference in 2012. And this was a really special conference. One of the things that the conference delegates had decided was they wanted to create a global network for the world's trails. And the session that we held sort of didn't quite work out, and everyone was very disillusioned or couldn't really see a way of how to make this possible. And the idea was essentially sort of put aside. I was disturbed by this because coming from South Africa, there I was sitting in the same auditorium with leaders from the world's major trails like the Appalachian Trail, the Bruce Trail in Canada, famous trails from Europe, trails from Australia, China, Japan, you name it. And I just realized sitting there that it was essential for us to create a global network of trails, especially when one realized how many trails around the world were essential to the livelihoods of rural communities from a tourism perspective. And so that 11th hour of this conference, the conference delegates agreed that we should give it a bash and attempt to create a World Trails network. And a founding committee was established, and at that founding committee, I was elected chairperson to really direct the founding of this initiative. And it's been 8 years that we've been working on the World Trails network, and we finally registered about 3 or 4 years ago in Switzerland as a non-profit association. And it took us many years to establish like which country should we be in and why and how and all these technical things that are part of establishing an international non-profit association. So today we are a global organization. We have members from over 48 different countries around the world. And we've also established in various parts of the world what we call regional hubs. So we have a hub in Asia called the Asian Trails Network. We have a hub in Central Europe called the Mediterranean Hub, actually, which focuses primarily on the Mediterranean countries. And we have a hub for the Americas, which works in cross networking and collaboration between countries in North and South America. So the World Trails Network is a phenomenal body. When we first established it, I was struck that we're in the 21st century, and there wasn't a global body representing trails. And yet trails, when you look at the economic impact that they have and the economic stimulation that they provide to many countries and especially emerging economies around the world, it's in the many hundreds of billions of dollars, which is not insignificant. And so that there existed no global forum for trails was quite astonishing. And it was, yeah, it made it more urgent for us to realize the importance of a network of this kind and why we need to get going, and especially then focusing on the types of projects that we've been focusing on. So we then have established within the World Trails, oh, sorry, that slide didn't show, I'm mixing up. So those are the 3 hubs that we have. And one of the ways we address our focus areas, which we've done from day 1 at that meeting in Korea, is we've established 8 international task teams for trails. Now, these international task teams are volunteer-driven, 100% volunteer-driven by experts in trail matters. And we have a task team, for instance, that looks at trails and nature, and that focuses on biodiversity. It focuses on trails that exist in protected areas or in national parks. We have a trails and culture task team that looks at the interface of trails and culture, which primarily are then trails of a pilgrimage type. So pilgrimages, long distance trails that have a cultural dimension to them. The Santiago de Compostela in Spain, for instance, is one of those. We then have a trails and events task team that looks at biannually producing our World Trails Conference. And that, I'm very proud to say, we are now, this year, we would have started our 8th World Trails Conference. It's been postponed for now, and that would be taking place in Nepal. But 2 years ago, we had our last World Trails Conference, which was also in Santiago in Spain. So the events task team is responsible for bringing people together from all over the world to collaborate, to convene, and to share their ideas and insights around trails, and to broaden our global knowledge of the trail sector. We have a task team that focuses on trails and knowledge, and that essentially looks at the resources we have available for sharing around the world on best practices for trails. We have a trails and media task team, and that looks at the interface between trails and media, and particularly today, we can see the vast impact that social media is having on trails and trail marketing in particular. And the Trails and Media team also produce our World Trails Film Festival. And I'm terribly excited about the next version of that will be coming out in conjunction with the next conference, which is a very unusual platform for showcasing the stories and storytelling around trails around the world. We're taking the theme a little bit away from adventure and really looking at the stories behind the scenes, the stories of the culture, the nature, the amazing unsung heroes that we find in the trail space in many countries. And then we have a trails and towns task team that focuses on urban trails and how critical they are in our time as well. Our trails and sustainability task team is producing amazing work around best practices, and it's probably one of the bigger task teams we have, and also probably one of the ones that is in a way slightly more important than some of the others, in that it focuses very much on how do we create and maintain good trails with sound sustainability indicators in place. And lastly, we have trails and tourism, which really is driving this important critical interface. And especially at the moment, I was recently on a webinar with the World Bank highlighting how trails essentially can be one of the few tourism activities that will probably be up and running before any other tourism activities, because the social distancing that we can practice in this time that we're living in on a trail is far more easy to manage than in museums or you know, on beaches where they're very crowded next to each other. So trails really allow us to get back and to bring revenue, in particular, back to rural communities where many of the world's long distance trails pass through. So I want to bring us then briefly to this image, which is an image of a wildlife waterhole in the Ocavango Delta in Botswana. And you can see the trails in this image. They are They are elephant trails, they are hippo trails or buffalo trails. And I like to maintain that we as a species, us humans, we essentially grew up on trails. You know, trails are in our DNA. We learned to hunt on trails. We would follow the tracks of other animals that we were hunting, and we quickly learned that learning how to navigate and read the tracks that are left by other animals is critical to our survival. Just as critical it is to know how to find water. And so I believe trails are deeply embedded in our psyche and have an immense amount to give back to us still if we spend time on them. This next image is one of my favorites as well. This is a diagram of the dispersion routes that humanity took on leaving Africa and spread across spread our cultures and many different races across the globe. And what's quite fascinating about this diagram is in many of these places where these arrows are, today you find long distance trails. We've got the long distance trail in the Himalayas, the Great Himalayan Trail going across the north of India there. We've even got the Abraham Path here in the Southeast Asia and Middle East. We've got the great trails leading to Santiago and across Europe. We've got trails in Africa, the trails in Asia, and then of course going into the Americas. And on the Russian side, we've got the Lake Baikal Trail, and then down the entire continental west coast of the United States, we've got the Pacific Crest Trail, and down further across the Americas into South America, some amazing trails emerging there. And literally, if you could walk back to back the world's long distance trails, you would be following in the footsteps of humanity as we progressed our journey out of Africa so many millennia ago. So essentially, the World Trails Network today is a collection of remarkable people, all of them passionate about trails, all of them active in trails in their own countries, in their own regions, in their own little villages even. And here's a photograph of the conference delegates from 2 years ago, who we had countries represented from about 48 different countries and close to 200 delegates. A very specialized community of people, but in the end, trail people are really salt of the earth. These are people who have a passion for the outdoors, a passion for nature, for culture, and for sharing all of that, and are earnestly looking to each other to establish best practices for their own region and to enhance and establish good trail standards that result in, at the end of the day, powerful and quality trail experiences. And that's really the crux of it, when it comes down to it, is the very reason for the existence of the World Trails Network is to ensure that we have good quality trail experiences, because with a quality experience, people return, and when people return, there's so many things that they gain from being on a trail, but the benefits that they also bring, that we bring as trail users to a region, are manifold. So Anisa, that's really how, it's a fairly long story, but it's a story of how I, from my studies in biodiversity corridors to championing trails in Southern Africa to really at this moment trying to champion trails all around the world, is how I got involved in the World Trails Network.
It's a wonderful story, Galeo. Thank you for sharing, and those fabulous photographs that gave us an entrance to the world that you've been living in and generating and contributing to. Thank you so much for your gifts to humanity that way. Abraham Path Initiative is a member of the World Trails Network, and I saw our colleague in your 2018 conference photograph. It's been a place for trainings. It's been a place to get knowledge, to take knowledge and then disseminate it further. So kudos to you and the organization. We're very glad to be associated with you. I was particularly moved when you spoke about the World Bank. Abraham Path Initiative had a 4-year program grant with the World Bank on the part of the path that is called Masar Ibrahim, the path in Palestine. And we found with their work statistically, over 57,000 people had walked on that trail over a number of years, that about the income of people who worked with the along the Masar Ibrahim went up approximately 30% annually if they were engaged with this as homestay hosts, as guides, other kinds of service providers. You know, people are eating, they're driving, they're doing all of those ancillary services. So we see the results, and now we're working in the Kurdish region of northern Iraq, where there's a whole new opening. Very, very exciting. But things are different now than they were when you got started. We are facing a global public health crisis, and that certainly has had an impact on our work. Tourism shut down. We're finding other ways to be supportive of our colleagues in Palestine and Jordan, Iraq, and so on and so forth. How has that had an impact on you? I know that you've had to close off, you know, at least one festival, the Garden Route Walking Festival. But what else is happening that you see is sort of cutting back and clamping down on this great work you're doing?
Anisa, I think, you know, mainly is many of our member countries, they are very dependent on tourism. You know, similar to where the Abraham's Path is in some ways. Certainly places like Costa Rica and Nepal. Nepal in particular is, you know, their entire GDP is dependent on tourism, and a majority of their tourism is trail related. The trekking trails of the Himalaya are a crucial revenue source for many communities. So the impact on these communities is immense. I mean, it's essentially a year of revenue that they're losing out on. So, you know, we're trying to see what we can do on the ground as best we can in supporting our member trails that are facing some of those challenges. And one of those things is to encourage people not to cancel trips if they have them, but to rather postpone them for another date, and really try and get back to some of these places to support the people who are so dependent on this kind of tourism that Trails delivers. Anisa, yeah.
I was going to say, Galeo, that the COVID-19 has affected you personally as well, not just professionally. And
yeah, I was unfortunate, Anisa, to have you know, come down with COVID-19, and it was luckily a mild case. But what we've seen with some of the mild cases, so I wasn't hospitalized at any time, was that people were having a very long recovery period. So it's taken me at least 2.5 to 3 months to come back to my full health again. So I don't wish it on anyone, and I think if I can say out of my own experience, really it's essential to practice social distancing, to stay as safe as you can, and if you do come down with this particular virus, you know, to know that you can also get through it, I think is important. And the trick is to just take it one day at a time, one step at a time. And like any good long distance walk, it can be a slow recovery. So I'm happy to be back in full strength, and I'm glad that I can join you here this evening.
Indeed. We've got about 50 people with us here on this webinar from all over the world. People are saying hello from Germany, from India, from Japan. And I really want to invite our audiences to use your control panel and put some questions in there for Galeo that I can transmit to him on your behalf. So one question here is, what surprises you most walking on trails around the world? What surprises you most?
That's great. That is a great. Where did that come from? Where's that
That's
question?
from our friend Oliver Pospisil in Düsseldorf.
Oh, Düsseldorf. Guten Abend or Guten Tag. Yes, what surprises me the most is two things, actually. So the first thing is that trails around the world, no matter what trail you're on, you very quickly feel at home. So there's something about walking on a trail that brings you back to, as I said earlier, like trails in our DNA. It makes you, it brings you back to yourself. And so you feel at home very quickly. Doesn't matter what kind of trail, doesn't matter where it is, how exotic it is, you feel connected to yourself, to the planet. And the second thing is that trails around the world all face the same challenge. And that is oftentimes a lack of reinvestment by the governments or the entities that own them. A lot of our trails are in a very dismal state of repair and need ongoing maintenance and looking after. So those are the two things that I find in common on every trail that I walk on. And it doesn't matter where it is in the world. You know, the Swiss trails are amazing, but I've been on some Swiss trails that need some attention. And, you know, same in the United States, great, incredible trails, beautiful experiences. And, you know, we can keep doing more to look after this incredible infrastructure that we've essentially inherited from many generations. The trails, the people who built some of the trails across Europe go back centuries and centuries.
So we've always wanted to walk. We've just had, that's been, as you say, in our DNA. We're sending, people are saying, I'm here from Brazil, I'm here from Canada. So this is possibly the most international audience we've had on our webinar. And we invite you all to stick with us if you'd like to hear from Abraham Path Initiative and know what else we're up to. Please go to our website, which is www.abrahampath.org, and we will be glad to add you to our mailing list. I don't have any other immediate questions from the audience. I'm sure they'll come up with some. But how else has the World Trails Network responded to the COVID pandemic? What are you doing? What standards are you putting in place? What recommendations?
I'll happily share that with you, Anisa. And what I'll start with is we've looked at essentially creating a trail guideline for hiking in this time of pandemic. And so I think I've got a slide coming up here or another image. Let's see if I can get that up. There we go. So maybe to answer that question, I'm gonna start with this image, which I think we all know what this is. Well, they're not hiking boots. These are what I call the salvation of humanity. And it's really very, very simple, because getting out, as I mentioned before, getting out on trail brings us back into contact with ourselves. It brings us into contact with others in an environment that is usually very supportive of us being our best. So I want us to just bear that thought in mind, is that trails bring us back to our humanity. And I'm gonna share a little bit more about that now. But one of the things that's really critical is in this time of pandemic, where many of us have had to spend many months in isolation or you know, on our own in lockdown, or isolated for 2 weeks in recovery. It's very easy to lose the sense of our connection to ourselves, our connection to others. And so having trails open again in many parts of the world now is a critical dimension of both physical and mental health, psychological health, spiritual health. And that's why we feel strongly that making trails open and accessible to the public where they are is really, really, really important. So one of the things we developed about 10 days ago, we published the COVID-19 and Trails Guidelines, which are designed to really address looking after yourself. It's a very simple 3-step process we've looked at: look after yourself, look after others, and lastly is look after trails. The first two, you know, each country has its own rules around what social distancing protocols are required. But the important one is getting people back onto trails is also how do we look after trails? And there's a couple of pointers that we've wanted to highlight there. This document is available for free and can be downloaded by anyone or any trail in the world, and you're welcome to share it as much as you like. It's on our website at worldtrailsnetwork.org. And there are multiple pages in this that speak specifically to to guidelines for trail managers, to guidelines for trail users, for different types of trail users, and how some of those guidelines shift and vary. So my recommendation is for all of us, trails are essential to our well-being. Get out there, spend time on the trails, but do so responsibly. Do so responsibly both for your own safety and health, but also for the safety and health of others. And while practicing on trails, there are a couple of pointers we want to look out for, that we don't cause more damage to trails in trying to keep our social distancing and allowing people to pass and move beside us when we're walking. So that brings me then back to this question of humanity. And one of the things I want to share with you is 6 lessons, or 6 life lessons, that I believe we can take from trails. And in particular for me, they are pertinent in this time, in this time of pandemic, where if we broaden our perception of what trails are and what they might mean to us and what their significance is and the values that they have for us as a humanity, we might appreciate why we need to be looking after them a little bit more. So in my country, this is a photograph of Nelson Mandela, and you know, his famous biography was The Long Walk to Freedom. And you know, he didn't choose that title, Long Walk, you know, arbitrarily. I think he's someone who deeply understood the values and commitment that a long walk requires from us. So yeah, he's just an inspiring man, and his entire work brings us back to our humanity. So the 6 lessons are broken up to spell the word trails. And so the T stands for tenacity. Really, it's the tenacity is about perseverance. It is about having a purpose of strength. It's about having a character that the character that it takes to complete a long distance trail, and willpower, dedication, being in it for the long term investment. And you have to have staying power. This is what long distance trails demand of us. And tenacity is one of these beautiful qualities that trails can gift us. And I love this image of this guy in the snow with his pack, and you can just see he's just going for it. So tenacity is a valuable quality to have. The next one, which the R for me stands for respect, and it's about respect for our environment, the trail environment, respect for others, both people and other species. Respect teaches us humility, and we grow to realize how small we are as individuals in the world, and especially when we're on a wild trail, one learns to have respect also for the elements. You don't know when the next blizzard or major storm might pull through. And so one learns to respect, while walking in nature, that we are just one species amongst many other species on a planet that really is self-willed. You know, we are there at the mercy of the elements. So respecting them is a fine idea. The next point or lesson for me is appreciation. And trails teach us to appreciate mostly ourselves. You know, what it takes to be who I am out there, putting myself into the elements. Appreciation of what it takes to make a fire. Appreciation for cooking water on a small little stove high in the mountains, or sleeping in a tent in the snow. Appreciation of our health and our well-being. You know, we're all aware of how much the social media and overworking can steal from our lives. So being out on a trail also brings us this deep appreciation of the value of our own individual lives, and how important it is to make time for ourselves and for our families and for our friends, and to be together. The next point, life lesson for me is this beautiful one. And there's maybe Einstein's not the most beautiful looking chap, but he certainly had a beautiful mind and insight. Research and science is showing us more and more that walking is one of the crucial exercises in keeping our minds fresh, young, active, and engaged. And you only have to speak to some of the world's great creatives. You can ask Beethoven or Steve Jobs or Einstein even. All of them have credited walking with being substantially important to their creative insights and the work that they produced. And I know myself that some of my best ideas come to me while I'm out walking. So insight is a crucial value that trails can bring us when we spend time on them. Love, of course, love. Love is critical and essential for everything. But trails make us, in my view, and allow us to fall in love again with the world. And it's not just the love of the closeness of others and fellowship and connection of kinship. It is, trails allow us again to love ourselves and others in a very authentic manner. Because when you're out on a trail, you don't have to try and prove anything to anyone. You're all struggling with the same hill or dealing with the same cold or heat or whatever it might be. Or you're meeting remarkable people and communities along the way. People whose lifestyles are completely different or foreign to one's own. So love is a beautiful thing, and it's one of my favorite things about what trails really ignite for us. I love this photograph, for instance, that we're looking at. This is a young team from, I think we're from 16 different countries in total. It's a team that the World Trails Network brought together in Japan, where we had young trail visionaries collaborate on a trail manifesto that I'll share with us a little bit later. But in this picture, we've got people from Australia, Ghana, Russia, Japan, Korea, South Africa, Switzerland, Scotland, Brazil, China. It's inspiring. And lastly, the S on the word trails for me stands for simplicity. And yes, it's a little bit Zen, but one of the things that trail life brings us is you don't have all the luxuries of life. You know, you're drinking out of a little cup, you have your one knife and spoon, or you have your tent, and your entire life is in your backpack on your back. So trails teach us simplicity. And I think if anything, in the time we're living in, coming back to basics, making our lives more simple, consuming less, all of these things are valuable attributes, and spending time on trail lets us appreciate these qualities and values. So I wanted to share these 6 lessons with you. And as my friend Zach, who leads our trails and media task team, says, trails shape people, and in turn, people shape trails. And so there's a beautiful relationship between these two. So yeah, you know, these lessons are fairly poetic and philosophical, but I hope that if you've been paying attention and you might be managing a trail in your own region or in your own country, these 6 lessons that I've shared with you are really a secret tool to reshape the narratives you might be using in order to market your trails. So instead of marketing your trails simply as a adventure activity or an outdoor sport or recreation, focus on these 6 elements, or just focus on one of them and align some of your messaging to these qualities. And I think you'll be surprised at how that talks to a completely different set of values that people can resonate with, and why they choose to then come on your trail. The benefits of trails are pretty substantial. And I've mentioned briefly, you know, especially for rural communities, but trails also benefit us from a health perspective, from a lifestyle perspective, from a recreation perspective. They also offer us alternative forms of transport, particularly in cities, and they are important for national parks around the world. There's hardly a national park I know of that does not have some trail system that essentially takes you from where you park your car or where you get out the bus, past the visitor center, and a trail is what leads you to the beautiful waterfall or the incredible view sites or the remarkable species or animals or trees that you might see in that park. So they're essential to the infrastructure of national parks. They are also immensely powerful tools for community building. Trails bring people from diverse backgrounds together to collaborate, to convene and create trail clubs and create the trails, look after the trails, maintain the trails. Trails are often a low cost or even no cost recreation option for many people. So what we find here in South Africa certainly is we have a large population that is very poor, that accessing trails is a way of recreating that is affordable and accessible for many. The outdoor education side of trails is again a benefit that we shouldn't overlook and should be aware of that our connection to nature, our connection to the sciences, and for many, many people who end up studying conservation or nature sciences, it was often a grandparent or their parents who took them out on a trail that instilled in them a deep love for wild places and wild things. And lastly, my favorite benefit for trails is perhaps one that isn't very obvious. This is a photograph of the devastating Twin Towers that happened some years ago now. And one of the things that is invisible in this photograph is what many people don't know, is that a large number of people escaped ground zero on a trail system that ran along the Hudson River. The roads were log jammed with traffic and cars and people coming out of shops and buildings, whereas the trail system along the Hudson River was almost a free-flowing movement of just people, because there were no cars, and you could actually move along that trail system fairly effectively out of harm's way. And so trails as a security infrastructure is how I like to phrase it. And you see the same thing happening in places where you've had tsunamis, where wildlife, domestic animals, and villages have used trail systems to escape the tsunami or earthquakes, for instance. And so this is a component that I believe we should pay a lot more attention to in our city planning, is how do we use trails not just for recreation, not just for alternative transportation within a city or urban environment, but how do we use trails as well as security infrastructure in times of crisis or in times of natural disaster. So yeah, you know, trails are very exciting, and it brings us to the question that was posed earlier by one of the delegates on the call. You know, the things that I see all around the world, and one of them is the lack of trail maintenance or sound trail design and planning. It's not enough to take some earth-moving equipment or a spade and shovel and go and make some pathway in the mountain. One needs to do it as one would be building a road. Trails require as much scientific and engineering skills to ensure that that infrastructure we build is sustainable for many decades and centuries even to come. So one of the projects that the World Trails Network is championing and working together with is, and maybe just briefly to give you a bit of context around this project that we're looking at, is a couple of years back, Adventure Tourism Association did some research on, you know, what are the most favorable adventure tourism activities, and it turned out that in the survey, 92.3% of people surveyed said that they had been on a trail on their last adventure tourism trip, and 50% said that they were planning to be on a trail. And the most popular adventure tourism activities were hiking, walking, and trekking. All of those happen on trail infrastructure. So the importance of trails to the adventure tourism sector cannot be emphasized enough. And especially when one realizes the many billions of dollars in revenue that adventure tourism generates for many countries on an annual basis. So we can then look at this project that the World Trails Network is championing in collaboration with Green Flag Trails, where we are essentially creating a tourism mark that helps the trail user to know whether they're on a well-managed and sustainable trail, and that offers a quality trail experience. And this is a group of people we trained in Greece last year in October. They came from about 16 different countries, and they were learning the Green Flag Trail auditing system that we have developed. One of the statements that one of our trail auditors said some years ago was, "A trail without a use is a useless trail." And I love this quote, because it really says that when we decide to design a trail, it's not just about the trail itself. It's not where you put overnight spots or where you have resting villages or anything like that. It's about, what is the purpose of that trail? Is it educational? Is it experiential? Is it cultural? Is it natural? What is the function of that trail? And it's critical to know what that trail use is all about, whether it's a mountain bike trail or a walking trail or a running trail, or, you know, whatever it might be. the use of the trail needs to be at the core of its design and conception. So that's one of the things that Green Flag Trails helps us to bring to the fore, and we focus on the idea of trail quality. Trail quality results in value for trail users. It results in the pride of the product for the managers. It increases income naturally, and increases safety. I see I might be running out of time, and he says that why I'm seeing your wonderful face come up to join us.
We have some questions from your audience, and I don't want us to run out of time before they get to hear some of the answers.
Okay.
Which some of the answers are already present in what you have shared with us too.
Great. So while those questions come in, I'm just going to plug my power cable in, if you don't mind, because I'm concerned my battery's going to go off.
Okay. Okay. Can you the questions are here. So go
okay,
ahead.
I can hear
plug
you.
it in.
I'm listening while I'm plugging it. Okay.
Okay. He's all right. He's listening. A lot of the questions that you're asking is about the future of trails, and I think that that Galeo has addressed some of those questions. But Galeo, in particular, there are questions about how to encourage younger hikers. Monica finds that most of the groups of hikers she just finds are over 50 years old. Not that 50 is old, but how can we encourage younger hikers? How about we advocates for trails? What is the most important activity advocates can undertake in order to ensure the future of trails? And in association with those two questions, Michelle is interested to know how can the tourism industry and the general public support the World Trails Network going forward?
Right,
So
those are really great.
Good ones.
Those are great questions. So I think I've got three of them, if I can remember correctly. To really, the younger generation of hikers are getting out there. One must not underestimate that there's a resurgence of hiking around the world, and in particular being driven by a younger demographic. And we can give thanks to that, to social media. Instagram in particular has had a phenomenal impact on tourism, but also on trails, and also some negative impacts on trails in many instances, because you end up with overcrowding potentially. But I'm very encouraged by the next generation getting onto trails, and we simply need to share them. I think, take your grandchildren out, take your children out. It's about cultivating those kind of practices and good habits. The second question was about advocates. Yeah, and okay, I'm not quite sure how to answer this other than to be a champion yourself. So trail champions are all of us, and it's up to all of us to also give back to trails where we can by joining clubs and sharing our stories. And one of the great things with the World Trails Network that we're really working on is different kinds of stories. So again, they're for filmmakers with the film festival we have, and for the online magazine that we produce. Again, a place for different kinds of storytelling to be shared. So yeah.
There's a question that comes along with that advocacy that reminds me of your conversation earlier, grandparents teaching their children. Nowadays, people who are out because they're on walking and they haven't got experience doing that, they're out because they've been quarantined and they need someplace to go, are not taking care of the trails. One of our viewers points out they're not taking care. They don't understand the damage that can be done by careless walking. How do we best, inform our fellow walkers how to be mindful?
Again, a really important question, Anisa, and there's some fantastic examples from around the world of how to deal with exactly that. And one of the critical ways is to organize within your community. So if you have a hiking club and there's a trail nearby, get involved with the trail authorities. You can set up a stand at the trailhead, and you can hand out pamphlets around best practice on trails, or you can engage with people, and especially young folk we've seen this as well now with the lockdown ending, immense numbers of people on our trails, and many people who you could quickly tell maybe on the trail for the very first time, they just were desperate to get outside. And so educating at trailheads is a really important place, I think, for engagement, and it's ongoing. That engagement is ongoing. Mm-hmm. I think the one question I haven't answered is how to support tourism and the World Trails Network itself.
Yes.
The best way to support the World Trails Network is just become a member. You know, it's $20 a year for individuals, and for hiking organizations or other businesses, it's a little bit more. But that's the best way to support the work that we're doing. Or otherwise partner with us. I'm a great believer as the chair in partnering. We've done some amazing projects with destinations around the world, and we're very open to creative ideas that help put trails on the map through helping tell their story. We did an expedition in Armenia last year. We've done training in Greece. We've done an expedition in Japan. We've got the trail journeys that we did in Europe, and other ones coming up in Nepal. So there's many ways to partner with us around creating awareness also for tourism destinations that have trails.
As well as donate to the World Trails Network, and I hope you will. Donate to the Abraham Path Initiative so that we can continue to bring you people like Galeo and other folks that we know from Southwest Asia, and other ideas about how you can be involved in making our world a better, more heartfelt place, which I think is somewhat in that love piece of trails, right? Connecting us to our world and to one another. And that may be the silver lining of this whole pandemic, is for those of us who are fortunate enough to recognize this as an opening to be connected more with one another in a variety of paths. Galeo, I'm afraid we are out of time, but I wanted our audience to know there's a really good video that Galeo is going to introduce, and we're going to show as the tail for this program. That's TAIL, tail. I want to thank you for being with us, Galeo. You've been a wonderful guest, and I hope we can get you back again and we can talk about how things have reopened at some point in the not too distant future. And I want to thank all of our guests for joining us this time, and hope you will be with us again in 2 weeks, where we're going to talk about Abraham's role in the Hajj pilgrimage, which is one of those pilgrimage opportunities that you spoke about. It's got its own particulars. We're going to have Bruce Feiler, the award-winning writer, with us in 2 weeks. So Galeo, you'll have the last word. Why don't you introduce this short film, and we will say see you next time.
Thank you so much, Anisa. It's been an incredible privilege to spend this hour with you and with our guests around the world. So I hope that the presentation has left you with something to take back to your heart, or to motivate you to get involved in your trails in your area and region. So the little video, it's a short little piece. It's really worth watching. It's about the trail manifesto that we developed in Japan with our 16 trail visionaries from around the world, and it's their words. And I hope you enjoy it. And you can find a full version of the 9-minute video on our website if you wish, under Trail Manifesto. So all the best to everyone. Stay safe out there and love the trails.
We are a trail tribe. We walk, we hike, we run, we ride. Trail is our story, our playground. A sexy line past peaks, through valleys, way over waterfalls. Beyond visions and goals and deadlines and beats, every dream adventure. Every journey meaning, every wild thing at home. Rising moon and sun and endless sky. Take a map, carry water, be trail ready. Embrace adventure and love what is wild. Taste the salt of trying. Be alone, be together, or just be. Stay the course and keep on track. We educate, we dedicate, we celebrate. We love that old song Freedom. We give thanks by giving back. Every step makes a difference. Every trail makes a life. This is our manifesto. To always love the path beneath our feet. To roam, to share, to wander on. We are a trail tribe. And the trail is a call to everyone.